This one. Let me hear. Yes. Oh. Yes. Oh.
Testing. And then this is just for moving around, right? Oh, okay.
Mute.
Twaire emitwalo esatu kati ebintu
See.
kakati olowooza enanansi
What you would like me to do, or I delete the background?
Do you mind if I just bring my one and use the HDI for
Sure. Okay.
That is that's because I see a lot of things are moving.
No, those ones are
This
fine.
one. No, this one
I
also
think it's
moves a
only
lot.
the, it moved, eh?
Yeah,
Okay.
a lot of things that just changed.
Okay. Then I'll leave them here as a backup, but you can try and switch.
Got it.
Okay.
That would be great, actually.
Yes. I'll just leave them as a backup.
A lot of things
Yeah.
that are not visible.
Yeah.
I can visit it from my.
All right.
Excellent.
Good. No worries. Okay.
What is it? It's just 6 minutes past.
Test. Good morning, everyone.
Thank you all for coming and being very punctual. We will try to do the same today. As we are waiting for the permanent secretary, we'll start with doing some minor introductions and activities already. And then he'll formally open the proceedings when he arrives. So my name is Marijke. People also call me Malaika. I work for ULearn, and today we're supporting this beautiful event, and I will let Lillian, the co-chair of the Livelihood Sector Working Group, introduce the event.
Good morning, colleagues. A big welcome, informally, yet, until the session is open. My name is Lillian Otiego, and I work for UNHCR as a Senior Development Officer, but I also co-chair the Livelihood Sector Working Group with the humanitarian partners, and I also chair the National Steering Committee for the Jobs Livelihood Response Plan with the Ministry of Gender. And so I'd like to just formally start by acknowledging all of you who've arrived. Thank you for making time and for being here early. We like starting early and we'll end early. But before we start, I'd like to just ask those who have spent a few sleepless nights getting you together. I think all of you have received a call and we've gotten reminders. So I'd like to request my co-chair for the Livelihood Sector Working Group to introduce himself. And Marijke has already done her introduction. They've been quite instrumental in helping us coordinate and do the logistics and organize. So Paul, you introduce yourself and then you can proceed.
Hi, good morning everyone. My name is Paul Mirishia. I work with One Vision as the response director and co-chair the sector with Ridian. We are greatly honored to have all of you here on time, and very eager to get all the knowledge, the experiences that you bring in this discussion. And just to note that this is just a start of this discussion. We expect that in coming months, this discussion will continue to expand and bring more impact to the people that we serve in Uganda. Welcome.
Thanks, Paul. I hope you can hear me well. I'm told sometimes my voice is a bit low. So I hope, can you hear me, Tracy? Good. I think you're the farthest. So we will start with very light. I think all of us have registered at the table. And so we will not do a round of introductions because normally it takes a bit of time. If you look at our program today, it's quite packed. It's a one-day program with a lot of intense discussions. It will end around 4 o'clock. So we intend to save every single minute we have. I'll quickly take us through the objectives of why we're here today. And then I'll help us run through the agenda to be able to appreciate why we're here. Now, this is something the sector has wanted to do for a while. And of course, COVID came in and there was that limitation for us to meet. But do realize, as Paul indicates, that the private sector is a key cog to drive any kind of process when we come to self-reliance or livelihoods. And so the refugee response in Uganda, we know that it's a mixture. We have protracted caseloads, then we have emergencies, but we also have refugees who've been here for a very long time. And they're already part of the community, they're engaged in economic activities. And so the private sector has been a partner, but we don't really know what are their experiences. Because we kind of seem to understand what the experiences of the humanitarian partners and our donors and our development partners are, but we want to hear a little bit about your experiences. So today's meeting is basically about you. And we thank those private sector actors who are here. If you realize, the composition of today's group is very little non-governmental organization, very few donors, very few development partners. We mainly have you private sector and the government, and a few other actors who we anticipate are the ones who then help to enable the process. So I will request that we move the slide to the next. So the objective of today's meeting is really to share. We want to share your experiences. We want to share some lessons. We do realize that also there's some information gap that could be, existing on the part of the private sector. It's an evolving space, but we want to listen to some of the challenges you have. Some of you already participated in some key informant interviews that we undertook. You gave us some of the challenges you have. But what we know is that there are also opportunities that you identified. So we want the key people here to hear what are the opportunities in these places. We want to share and exchange information, not only from UNHCR and humanitarians to you, but we want you to share information across. There's connections that will be made today between private sector to private sector, but also between development partner and private sector. So let's see what kind of information is going to be shared that will be useful for you. But ultimately, this is a first initial dialogue that has happened for us. So this is the initial dialogue, and so we're initiating dialogue today. We want you to talk, to express between government, the policymakers, between the development partners who work with government to invest and to help them achieve their development objectives, with the humanitarian actors who've been very active in the refugee response, as well as amongst yourselves, because there's one private sector actor who's going to help another private sector actor with the solution. So that's really the objectives of today. The agenda, you have it in your folder. It's a little bit more detailed, but it's basically split in, we are going to have 3 sessions, or 6 sessions, mini sessions, but it's basically big sessions. So we're going to have an introduction. As soon as the PS comes in, we're going to have formal official opening remarks, and we'll start with our colleagues who are already, ready to give us their views, their perceptions, but also give us some vision and some encouragement in what they anticipate. If you look at the program, you can see the people who are going to give us their opening remarks. Then we move quickly into context setting. We do realize sometimes the terminologies are a bit complex. We use it differently from you. We want to have a good understanding of when we say private sector, what is it? Some of us might not really have a good grasp of what is a small-scale business, or what is a big company. So we want to have that, because we'll use these terminologies the whole day. After that, we're going to go to express now. We want to hear from some of you, what are your experiences? So we have some private sector actors who will present, already working in these spaces. How are they finding it? So we will hear from them. After which, we will head straight to now the overall government presenting, talking to us about how is the macroeconomic landscape really for you as a private sector. How does it look like? But also, what are some of the efforts they are putting in place to try to address some of the challenges that may have come about. We will have a presentation from the International Finance Corporation, who did a consumer and market assessment to try to monetize the market for you, to understand a bit of the terminologies and the things that interest you. And then we'll want to have a panel. Now, the panel will be composed of some of you, and we'll have in-depth discussions. You'll have an opportunity to ask questions, but before the panel, we'll have to have group discussions. We will break away, and we'll discuss some of the things that will have emerged from some of the presentations that will be made today. So out of these group discussions, we expect certain questions, which will be posed to the panel. Then we close the day. So after the panel discussions, it will be like, we're done. So let's figure out what has come out of this meeting today. So that's a quick overview of how the program will look like. We anticipate that it's going to be intense. We will have a timekeeper, Amareke. She's very good at keeping time. And so we will be on time. And I do talk a lot, as you can already tell. So she keeps us in check. But at the end of the day, I believe we'll already share some experiences. We'll want to hear from some of you. What have you taken away from? This is the first time it's happening. So what have you taken away? So we'll have random pick 2 people to tell us what have you taken away, mainly from the private sector. And then we'll also have some key takeaways. And then we hear what next. Because it's the first time. I don't think do we have another dialogue? Do we have some bilateral follow-ups? What then do we take away from here? So thank you very much for listening to me. I will now give it up to Mareke. She's going to take us through some housekeeping and some things that you need to remember as we wait for the permanent secretary. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Lillian, for informally opening. Sorry. I just wanted to flag a couple of things that will be important to note for the day. We'll be handing out question forms. They'll be on each of the tables. So as the proceedings go on, the presentations, Lillian said we'll hear from IFC and from others. If you have any questions, please write them on the question forms. Throughout the day, we'll be logging them in a database. And then when we have the Q&A session before lunch, we will pick some of these questions to be answered and discussed during the Q&A session. I apologize if your question is not picked. Some of them will, of course, answer you bilaterally. So please no hard feelings. But Hassan, who is walking around in the back, will be handing out the question forms, putting them on the tables, as well as be logging your questions during the day. So please make sure that he gets your questions. Then we have some posters in the back there, as well as to the sides. So we have been mapping as much as we could private sector actors that are operating in refugee hosting areas, especially in the agriculture sector. So that's the first map there with those round circles. Then we have service providers for agri-tech services. That's the one in the middle. And then to the left, trade bodies, umbrella organizations, coordinating entities. Now, these are ongoing processes. This is not something that is final. So they're very much for us today to look at during the break and add sticky notes where things are missing, where things are wrong. Please correct us so that we can make them more comprehensive and share all of you after the dialogue in the coming weeks and months. So as you've seen, there's resources over there for you to pick. Lillian already flagged that the agenda for today is in that little pocket folder. We're going to try and keep time, as Lillian said, and make it high-paced so that we make it as engaging as possible. It's really a unique moment for people to be in one room together like this. We don't have very many of them. So I always ask, try and really make the most of it, meet people, try and keep your laptops closed as much as possible, your phones, or step out if you need to really take a call or answer an email. Everyone understands. But while we're together, let's make the most of the fact that we are able to kind of meet across stakeholder groups and with people that work in the same field. Then, last but not least, I want to say a big hi to everyone online. I believe we have about 70 people on the call right now that will be following online. So apologies for the tech around, for people filming. I hope everyone's comfortable with that. It's just so that people that are interested but are based in the settlement or are based not in Kampala are able to listen in, join us. So welcome to all of you as well. I think that is it. So right now I'll be handing back over to Lillian.
So, great. So now we start the formal process. And I think the one thing that Marik did not mention is that since today is intense and it's deliberate, we are here deliberately, we will have to put our laptops off unless you're presenting or taking notes, and kindly let our phones be on silent so that we take advantage of listening to each other. And do take advantage of the person seated next to you to get to know them during tea break, because this is where we hope you can make connections, but also share information. As I said, this is the first time we're meeting private sector actors as humanitarian partners formally. So we want to really, hear how, exchange and hear how best we can, work together moving forward. So I have the honor of introducing some of our, colleagues in the sector. They're going to open for us this session. And we will start. We have the representative from FCDO who's going to open for us with some remarks and high expectations of this session. After which then we will have our deputy representative from UNHCR and ultimately then the permanent secretary from the Ministry of Gender. So welcome. Jordan Martindale.
Thank you, everyone, and good morning. I didn't realize I was going on first. That was my surprised face. But I would like to welcome particularly the Permanent Secretary from the Ministry of Gender. Thank you very much for honouring us with your presence today. Thank you, everyone else. I'm going to go on all protocols are observed. I had hoped that someone would have gone through more of the protocols by this point, but please forgive me. We need to get on with business, and I know that the private sector will respect moving forward. So my name is Jordan Martindale, and I'm the team leader for growth, prosperity and climate at the British High Commission here in Kampala. And you'll note from my title, I am not a humanitarian. This is not my normal field, but I'm really excited by the opportunity to be joining together the development, the economic, and the humanitarian. Brilliant, thank you. So I'd like to thank our partner, ULearn, the Livelihoods, Resilience and Sector Working Group, Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, and the Office of the Prime Minister for organising this event, and UNHCR, and Méstil, and World Vision. I'm just looking around the room. I think it's really exciting that we're all together today to have this important discussion. And, you know, as we all know, Uganda hosts over 1.5 million refugees and asylum seekers. That's the third largest in the world and the largest in Africa. And that is a fact that's, you know, outside of the humanitarian circles, to be honest. It's not that widely known. And that's because Uganda's doing a really good job, actually, of hosting all of those refugees. And these refugees, they come to Uganda from many different countries and circumstances, but they have diverse abilities and skills. They're young, they're old, businessmen and women, farmers, teachers, health workers, pastoralists. They on average are spending 7 years in Uganda. And these are 7 years where, like everyone else, like you, like me, they want to be able to be earning a living, looking after their family, living with dignity, respect, and contributing to their community and to the country in which they live. And there's the opportunity to do that in Uganda. Uganda has one of the most progressive open-door refugee policies in the world, where refugees are given the same rights as citizens, the free movement, access to basic services, the right to work. This means that, actually, this is an area where we should be really focused as an international community on supporting refugees to be able to live the life that they want to be living. Because if it can't work in Uganda with these government policies, then actually we're going to struggle to make it work anywhere. But too often, actually we have, and you know, I am a large donor, we've been focusing on the humanitarian response to refugees without sufficient focus on building the opportunity for refugees to achieve their goals, their self-reliance, and to contribute to the country that's offering them shelter. But we've made some really exciting steps. So we moved to cash in many refugee settlements, and this has increased income in and around settlements by $2 for every $1 of cash provided. Refugees are a market with demands, and the move to cash has brought in the private sector to supply them. And I'd be really excited to hear from the private sector about the difference that has made. But again, you know, as a development partner, I know that too often our support has cut out the private sector, actually. And we've created an environment where businesses are crowded out from making the investments. And they are not able to access the information and the skilled labour and infrastructure that enables them to make investment decisions that include refugees. And we need to make sure that we are supporting, providing support that addresses these barriers. And today I would like to hear from the private sector about what we're doing right, but also what we're doing wrong and what we should be doing differently. Refugees are a large market for your goods and services as the private sector. But also, refugees are entrepreneurs. They're micro and some larger businessmen and women, traders, labourers, agriculturalists. And I want to explore also today, how do we bring refugees into the private sector supply chains, into businesses, and stops businesses from being able to do this, and what stops them from being able to enable refugees to be able to supply the economy of Uganda. I know that the integration of refugees into the Ugandan economy, I know it is not easy. There are real reasons why the private sector struggles to benefit from the market demand within the refugee community and integrate refugees into their supply chains and businesses. So do tell us what's working, what's not working, and what your level of ambition is. And don't be hesitant. Be propositional about what we should be doing. And remember to keep your private sector hats on. You have to be making money for this to work. This is not about private sector doing more charity work for refugees. Actually, how do we ensure that this is about private sector integrating refugees into the market and everyone making more money. Because that is what is going to make this sustainable, and this is what's going to make it actually real. I think the ULearn reports will be able to really set the scene, and they've brought us together for some genuine dialogue, and I really look forward to hearing from everyone and challenging the norms that we've set ourselves over the last few years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very salient points and very critical points you've made. Thank you very much. So I think I'll introduce next our Deputy Representative, Mr. Jason Hepps, who's about a week old, but we're happy to have him here. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice to see you. Again, Jason Hepps, Deputy Representative. You stole my thunder, as I say, because I am only 1 week old in Uganda, so I will not attempt to try to share with you or tell you that all that I know about Uganda. That would be a bit presumptuous. All protocols observed. I would say thank you for all gathering here, the core institutional actors on promoting private sector engagement in refugee hosting areas. We have the private sector here, we have the government here, we have the development, we have the humanitarian actors here. And this is in effect what you may have heard of before, the Global Compact on Refugees. If you have not heard of it, you will be hearing more and more and more of it, the GCR. It is the win-win-win. Something that we think is very obvious. It should become obvious to you. If it hasn't, for refugees, a win for government, a win for business, a win for the host communities. I'm only 1 week old in Uganda, but I was here 18 years ago when I started my UNHCR career on a visit. The purpose of the visit was to see the model in Uganda, which was essentially the Global Compact on Refugees in action from the beginning. The country had embraced the model where in places, and now this is my 10th location that I'm working, in places that I had seen that pretty much the message was refugees are a burden, they're a drain on us. Here, refugees in Uganda and the host communities were being embraced as a resource, labor for growth, for and inclusivity for everyone, the hosts and the refugees. So Uganda has been a leader. I have always, from that visit 18 years ago, I've always said to myself, ooh, this would be a nice place to come to. It had always been on my radar. 18 years of romanticizing. I'm finally back, and I'm looking forward to settling in here and meeting all of you and working with you. The Global Compact on Refugees seeks to bring this model from Uganda and has been seeking to a new level, to bringing it to scale and to bring these individual efforts to scale. And it's those of you that are here that are making and will make it happen. And without you, it will not happen. So I'd therefore like to thank the government for making and sustaining this enabling environment for so many years and working to do so and listening here. Private sector actors who are already working with and engaging the refugees communities and the host communities and looking to expand further and open to listening to this. Institutions I'd like to thank, such as the IFC and others who are helping to ensure informed and evidence-based investment decisions for the private sector and other actors. And I'd like to thank the development and humanitarian partners here who are working to resource and invest in making this happen. A last point, when we put all these resources here of our time, of money to do something like this, we need to, it's only worth it if there's a change at the end of the day and something amongst all of us, and that there would be a change, a difference. And I really hope and expect that this meeting is a trigger for further dialogue, for further engagement, for further discussion, and then ultimately further investment amongst the refugees, the refugee hosting areas, so for the betterment of them, of us and Uganda. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jason. So now it's my honor to introduce and to invite the Permanent Secretary from the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development, Mr. Agre David Kibenge. He's going to give us the opening remarks and officially open this session for now formal discussions.
Colleagues from government ministries, departments and agencies, and especially Office of the Prime Minister, our partners, the UN agencies and all the other development partners, civil society organizations, private sector representatives, NGO representatives, ladies and gentlemen. A very good morning to you all. It's my greatest pleasure to welcome all of you to this important private sector engagement where I'm sure we will contribute effectively to the discussion that can help not only promote inclusive development within this country, but also support government in its effort to protect not only rights of the most vulnerable persons in the country, which is also part of the mandate of our Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development, but also to support especially the refugee host communities, integrate fully our brothers and sisters into the development process. I would like to begin by appreciating the contribution that all of us here are making. The lead government institution being Office of the Prime Minister, the line ministry departments and agencies, the local governments, especially those in the refugee hosting areas. All of you are partners. Ladies and gentlemen, would like to appreciate your contribution. Of course, we've had the numbers from Jordan in terms of how many refugees Uganda is hosting and why it is ranked as one of the countries hosting the highest number of refugees in the world, but also first probably within Africa. We've had an influx of refugees, especially from the Sudan and the Congo, who contribute a number of refugees. I personally have been associated with the country's response severally. While at the Ministry of Education and Sports so many years ago, I participated in developing a program for involving schools in environmental conservation. And I did have a short stint for about a year plus. I was actually based in Germany, working with the UNHCR office, promoting these kind of activities in schools. Later, I found myself in the office of the Prime Minister, where again I worked very closely with the office and government in our refugee response plan. But I also, when I went back to Ministry of Education, I led the team that developed the education response plan for refugee host communities and the refugees themselves. So in terms of efforts to address the needs of our colleagues, our brothers and sisters, I'm proud to have been associated, and up to this point, under the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development, I was also associated with the development of the Jobs and Livelihoods Response Plan, again, which targets the refugee and host communities. We have, certainly as a country, we boast of a good policy and legal framework to facilitate inclusive development and participation of the refugees especially. And that is why Uganda is considered a model and pilot country in the implementation of the Global Comprehensive Refugee Response Framework, which is aligned to the National Development Plan and under the Settlement Transformation Agenda. It is based on the principle of international cooperation and on burden and responsibility sharing. The framework transfers the biggest burden for protection, assistance, and support to refugees to host states and communities. It recommends a comprehensive refugee response with the involvement of national and local authorities, international organizations, international financing or financial institutions, regional organizations, regional coordination and partnership mechanisms, civil society partners, including faith-based organization, academia, the private sector, media, and the refugees. Ladies and gentlemen, today at this dialogue, we have representatives from government of Uganda and all those key stakeholders that I've mentioned, and are here to collectively contribute to private sector engagement in dialogue and in the programs that government of Uganda has rolled out. And amongst the three objectives is to reflect on the evolving private sector engagement and experience in refugee hosting areas, including challenges and emerging opportunities. We are also here to exchange information on ongoing and planned development initiatives or investments in the refugee hosting areas. We are also here to initiate dialogue between private sector actors, policy makers, development and humanitarian actors on potential pathways to enhance engagement in the refugee hosting areas in line with our National Development Plan, Strategic Objective 2, of strengthening private sector capacity to drive growth and create jobs, as well as the Jobs and Livelihoods Integrated Response Plan of the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development. This engagement will therefore entail sharing of experiences by the private sector actors operating in the refugee hosting areas and those who plan to do so. 2, presentation of key highlights from a consumer and market study on economic activities, employment trends, consumption levels, and consumer preferences in refugee hosting areas. 3, sharing information to raise awareness of refugees as a resource and their obligations and rights in the economic development of this, their country of asylum. That, for me, is what convinces me, the fact that we should all look at refugees as a resource rather than as a burden. There are refugees who have been born in this country or who will be born in this country. There are chances that they could grow up, study in this country, which becomes their home. They'll work in this country. They'll contribute to the development of this country. So to that extent, they are an important resource, as important a resource as all the other citizens of this country. Of course, we'll also have panel discussions and in-depth conversations on existing and potential pathways for enhanced private sector engagement within these areas. Ladies and gentlemen, maybe just a quick one in terms of the Jobs and Livelihood Integrated Response Plan, which the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development unveiled in April of 2021 and was a result of 3 years of consultations with partners to holistically address the challenges of self-reliance. This plan envisions a secure, self-reliant and resilient refugee and host community households with a goal of ensuring that refugees and host communities are socially, economically, and financially included in a sustainable manner in local development. We had set ourselves a target of achieving this by 2025. I don't know if that was very ambitious. Of course, we will plead that within that very plan, two of the 5 years were wasted as a result of the lockdowns. But that did not mean that people did not continue engaging in economic activities, but certainly it affected the target or the plans we had made at that time. This plan is anchored on 5 development pillars and will ensure: 1, strengthening refugee and host community social cohesion; 2, enabling entrepreneurial-led development and market growth systems; 3, increasing agricultural productivity, production, and marketable volumes; 4, increasing access to market-relevant skills training to enhance employability and job creation; and 5, promoting an effective shock-responsive refugee and host community social protection and social inclusion systems. The plan is to better define opportunities with partners and other relevant actors in order to implement sustainable livelihoods programs for refugees and host communities in Uganda. And the private sector, which is the reason we have a lot of interest in this dialogue. The private sector's role is crucial in driving the social and the development of this country, including development within the refugee hosting areas and empowerment of these communities. So, ladies and gentlemen, Uganda recognizes the role of the private sector in the national development in line with the SDGs, while the Global Compact on Refugees, which Jason referred to, emphasizes the need to maximize engagement with the private sector to contribute towards sustainable interventions that ease pressure on the host country, helps to build resilience for refugee and host population for self-reliance and eventual economic growth. And to actualize all these, the private sector will have to be positioned in a central role in the growth of the economy through investments in the various business opportunities that exist within the country and within the country in its entirety. Successful business is that which identifies a need and innovatively creates solutions to address that need. There is a potential of 1.5 million refugees and over 40 million nationals that the private sector has at its disposal. So we would like to refocus the private sector to take advantage of the opportunities, the major business opportunities that exist within the refugee host areas. Government, ladies and gentlemen, will continue to provide security, of course, an enabling environment for business to thrive. Government is already heavily investing in infrastructure development and in participatory involvement of communities in the development of this country. I'm sure all of us are now familiar with the flagship program of the parish development model, which aims to involve everybody at community level, at parish level, and even within the refugee host communities. There are such structures that can enhance participation of the refugees and citizens within that particular area. There are a number of pillars government has come up with for purposes of promoting that local economic development. I will not go through all these. I therefore appeal to the private sector to take advantage of these developments and invest in refugee host communities. And our development partners, I invite you to continue working with government to supplement, to complement all these efforts. Today's discussion, as I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, is for us only a starting point for further discussions that should happen to continuously engage private sector and all of us here, the stakeholders. Of course, we should not expect to have solutions to all the challenges that there are in a single day, but rather we'll have to keep the conversation and the actions alive within the coming months and years. I would like to conclude, ladies and gentlemen, by thanking you once again for creating time, giving us your valued time for purposes of us moving together as partners in an effort to develop our country and everybody in it. These days they normally use the saying, leaving no one behind, and I think that should be the phrase that should motivate us in everything that we do in our various capacities. I would like to thank you for your kind attention. I was asked also to officially declare this dialogue open, but as I do so, I'll also plead, I had already pleaded with the organizers that I may not personally stay on. Actually, I think in these very premises, I was required for another meeting. I'm required at office for other urgent business, but kindly permit that I'll be leaving. And the ministry is effectively represented and will participate fully up to the end. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, and indeed it's an honor to make time as a first thing in the morning to come and open this dialogue for us. And of course, thank you, our Deputy Representative, UNHCR. I also know you have to take off other pressing matters. And thank you very much, Jordan, from the FCDO. And in addition to this, I think it's also important that we acknowledge the other parties who are here We do have other government entities who are also represented here, as well as other development partners. So from the government front, we do also have the Office of the Prime Minister represented here. We do have Ministry of Agriculture, who are also going to be here with us throughout the day, as well as Ministry of Finance. They will have a presentation at some point, but they'll also be with us throughout the day. This just we are acknowledging the importance that they've given to this meeting today. On the development partner side, we have the Netherlands government represented here. We also have the World Bank represented here. And we also have the Danish government represented here, as well as the EU represented here. So these are the development partners who are here. I think we also have USAID here with us today. And those are the development partners who are going to participate throughout the day, I believe. The rest of us are the humanitarian partners, UNHCR. Of course, we do have ILO, and we have World Vision, and other non-governmental organizations who we normally engage with on a day-to-day basis. So in the interest of time, I'd like to now, since the session has been officially open, to quickly transition us to the formal discussions. And thank you very much for those who took part in planning, and those who are going to facilitate, and those who are going to be on the panel. All of us, I think we are houseful. And I think online, at the beginning, we had registered over 70 participants, but we had about 120 participants who have registered to participate online. As Marik said, this day is going to be streamed live, and we hope there's no inconvenience that will be caused. So please, this is the Jobs Livelihood Response Plan that is under the purview of which we are even convening, that was developed by Minister of Gender, and it's what the PS was actually talking about. Feel free to take a copy at the desk. There are few knowledge pieces that are there. I think they've run out. If you haven't done that yet, please do that. We made a point of ensuring that you have all the documents. We also have the IFC study that was done on the consumer market assessment for all the refugee hosting areas. Please feel free to take a copy. But these are also available online for those who don't want to have, to carry them physically. So next, Marik, take us on.
Thank you very much, Lillian. Great. So what better way to start than to try and kind of define together some of the key terms that we'll be using throughout the day. What is private sector engagement? What are small, medium-sized businesses? So I would like to invite Apollo from Private Sector Foundation Uganda, who will be helping us to kind of just quickly put us all in the same frame of mind, so that we can engage together. Now, on the center of your table, there's a couple of sticky notes. So at a certain point, Apollo will just indicate that you can all write down the definition, and then I'll be moving around to collect them so that we can come to a joint one. Thank you very much. Apollo, over to you.
Thank you, Marika. And good morning to you all. It's an honor to be in a room full of private sector enthusiasts from government, the development sector, and from the private sector. Drawing from the speech of the PS, it was clear the permanent secretary shared 80% private sector information and 20% government. It is testimony of the fact that the government of Uganda does not pay lip service to private sector engagement. My role this morning is to run you through a reflection exercise on some terms that we'll be sharing here today, so that we're all on the same page. Before I do that, I just want to say a little bit about the Private Sector Foundation Uganda, which is the apex body for the private sector in this country. The Private Sector Foundation Uganda represents close to 300 different business associations, and we have a membership of close to 2 million individuals. Within that, we are working in partnership with the MasterCard Foundation to provide work opportunities for youth. Some of these youth include refugees and members within host communities. And we do that by working in partnership with the private sector from private sector companies from 5 different sectors, including the agriculture sector, trade and allied services sector, the construction sector, the tourism sector, the manufacturing sector, and the creatives. And to date, we have so far managed to open up about 90,000 new work opportunities for youth. I'll be sharing some of those examples. So let's get into the reflection of some of the terms that we'll be working with and through over the rest of today. So the private sector. I'm not going to say anything new, just want to make sure that we are all on the same page. So the private sector is the part of the economy that is run by individuals and companies. It is most importantly for profit, and second, it is not state-controlled. A private sector actor is anyone involved in or representing a private sector company, as some are represented in this room. We are going to work with a UNCDF definition, which states that private sector refers to non-state, for-profit economic entities that influence and steer local, national, and international markets. Now, excluded from this definition non-governmental organizations, independent foundations, and civil society groups. Now, included in this definition are small businesses, multinational companies, corporate foundations, social enterprises, financial institutions, and industry associations operating in formal and informal markets. So, in front of you, on your desks, you have some colorful sticky notes, and I'd like us to just run through an exercise. During this exercise, I request you to write your definition of private sector engagement, specifically in a humanitarian response setting. What is your definition of private sector engagement in a humanitarian response context? So there are some sticky notes on your table. Please make use of them. And then we will move around and pick these the beautiful ideas that you've put together. If you don't have sticky notes on your table, raise your hands. We'll be sure to get a private sector company to deliver them to you. Okay? We're all good? So what is private sector engagement in a humanitarian response setting, in your opinion? Yes, Marek?
And just a flag for the people online, there should be a link that they can click that will take them to a Mentimeter poll, and they'll be doing the same exercise. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we will read some of the sticky notes that we have in the room. We'll also pick up some of the ideas that are coming through online. Amazing, amazing. That's what happens when the private sector gets together. Yeah, so there's relation. Okay, so there's some amazing ideas coming through. I'll just speak out the themes that we'll see. I see relationship building for inclusion. I see the provision of services at a cost, so fee-based services. Okay, provide. I see business information and business-to-business linkages. Okay, I've seen one shot here. It's saying handouts and dependency. Okay, that's an interesting perspective. We shall delve into that from a private sector perspective. Are we creating dependency or getting the refugees and host communities around us depend on handouts, or are we actually empowering them? You had the PS talking about empowering. He talked about inclusion. He talked about economic empowerment. Very strong private sector words. Okay. Thank you, Paul. Now, Paul, you write like me, and I don't mean that as a compliment. Were you a doctor before you joined the private sector? Okay. Okay, so we'll get to that. Okay, so let's do this together. Lillian, do you have another mic? Please get a mic. Okay, so there is supply and provision of food and non-food items. So there is demand and there is supply. Working with businesses to unlock opportunities, so there's opportunities. So private sector engagement responds to opportunities. Okay, anything?
I saw something on cash on wheels. Cash on wheels, that's private sector engagement.
Yeah.
And grants, I also saw grants. Yeah, that's private sector engagement. So these are your understandings of what this is about. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I've read that.
We also have some online definitions: business development services, alignment of expectation and long-term goals. It's a moment when private sector are consulted on their roles and responsibilities to develop the markets. Interesting.
Okay, so there's another interesting one here. Inclusion, inclusiveness of NGOs as key players to the development of grants and issuance of grants. Okay, creating an enabling environment, that's a nice one. So amazing ideas. So what I'm going to do is just quickly run you through some of these. So we will get back to that. We will group those. And okay, so some key terms. When we talk about private sector engagement in a humanitarian response context, it refers to activities in which private sector actors play a role either as a supplier to aid-driven agencies, a financial donor. Private sector actor may also come in as a technical advisor, especially if they are providing advice in an area of expertise. We see that happening a lot, especially in the ICT sector. A private sector actor can also play a role as an innovator or as a direct provider of aid. Okay, so importantly, we don't have a silver bullet to define private sector engagement. Because it encompasses a range of modalities, it includes various levels of engagement, and it involves a multiplicity of actors and sectors that may refer to livelihoods, as the permanent secretary rightly alluded to, livelihoods and resilience, education, energy, health, agriculture, ICT, governance, finance. I also talked about the creative sector at some point, so it's wide. Now, there are a number of pathways for private sector engagement. I'm just going to take you through 5 important pathways that may include the sharing of capabilities. So such as technology or technical expertise to provide access to humanitarian assistance, financial services, or in some cases we've also seen examples of e-learning. Those examples will be shared in the course of the day. Another pathway is the extension of services by adapting an existing business model that can be used to sell goods or services to refugees. Another pathway is enabling employment by providing job training and entrepreneurship support to refugees. There is also another pathway that can be applied of integrating refugees into value chains by hiring refugees directly or by working with smaller enterprises that hire refugees through sourcing or subcontracting work. And at the Private Sector Foundation, we're working with 2 private sector agencies, one called Green Pulse and another one called Farm Uganda, within these settings. They're working with refugees as outgrowers and also as franchisees. Those examples will be shared later. Another pathway is building a refugee-focused business through the selling of goods and services tailored to refugee populations. So, as we fix technical issues, I quickly want to run you through the definition of an SME. This is a working definition that we'll be working with over the course of the day. So, according to the Uganda Bureau of Statistics, the definition of a micro, small, and medium enterprise. I'll start with a micro enterprise. A micro enterprise is an enterprise that's employing fewer than 5 employees and has a total asset base that does not exceed 10 million Uganda shillings. So that's a typical micro enterprise. Your typical small enterprise, on the other hand, will employ, on average, 5 to 49 employees and have a total asset base that does not exceed, typically, about 100 million shillings. So that's your small enterprise. Now, a medium enterprise, on the other hand, is an enterprise that has an employee base of employees not exceeding 100 and a total asset base that does not exceed 360 million Uganda shillings. So that's almost $100,000, we could put it at that. So those are the definitions that we are going to be working with in the course of the day, and we're going to get an opportunity to interact more on that. So back to you, Marika.
Thank you so much, Apollo. That's great. Thanks for setting the scene. Yes, big hand of applause. That's great. Thank you very much for bringing us all into the same kind of understanding of what we're talking about. So now, before I hand over to the next speaker, I just want to remind you that there's question forms on your table. Please fill in. If you have any questions in the course of the presentation, please come down. We'll be collecting them and they'll be answered during the Q&A. So now we've looked at some concepts. Now we want to look at what's happening on the ground in the refugee hosting areas, in the agriculture sector, what is really already happening on private sector education and who, engagement rather, and who better than Paul Murichia, the co-chair of the Livelihood Sector Working Group, to give us a quick rundown. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you, Marika. Once again, good morning. I appreciate some people came after I said good morning, so good morning to the newcomers. I am supposed to save some time, so I'm the one who's supposed to speak shorter than anybody else, and I'll try and do that. We'll be looking at a number of things. We've defined the concepts. We know why we are here, but what experiences do we have? What is the available evidence that we have on this discussion? That's what I'm going to be sharing about. And normally what we've been doing with our partners and a huge appreciation to URAN that supports us in gathering this evidence together, doing a lot of desk reviews, analyzing that data, and then presenting it in a very easy format. You will appreciate that the humanitarian world has a lot of jargon. So this team supports us to bring the jargon in a simple way. In a running review, normally we want to get what is available evidence, what lessons are we getting out of it, and then we disseminate that, which is what we'll be doing today, is the dissemination. I will not speak about this one so that we go to the more interesting content. And one is thank you. So if you remember sometime in May of 2022, we had a strategic workshop where we brought in together a lot of actors, but not the private sector. In that meeting, we mapped out on what needs to be done for this sector to move forward. And among the key things that we identified is what are the further areas of evidence and research. So the private sector engagement topic came up as a meeting of the May 2022. So we followed up with that and said, how do we move this discussion forward? So we had the value chain standards analysis. In May 2022, we had about 30 different value chain assessments that were done. And remember in that meeting, we said, please stop spending money on value chain standards. We want you to go and implement the ideas that have come and test those ideas and see what is now the missing gap. So we did an evaluation, and sometime in November, we had another meeting where we brought together a technical team that did a review, and we have 10 value chains that are identified as the most viable in refugee hosting districts. This is because some crops do very well in the north, and some may not do very well in the south. Some of them have got private sector that is investing in them, and therefore there's already a market. There's a, where we can do progression. There are some that we may be doing, but they are not very profitable. So that was the purpose of that meeting. And then after that, the next discussion now came in on the private sector, where we got a lot of information on what are humanitarian actors doing, what is the private sector doing, and connect those two pieces together. When you get some time and check on what we have on those big documents we have on the site, you realize that there is a lot of information that you might probably not have been aware of: the trained bodies, the associations, the actors. So this information needs to come together so that you actually know whom to work with. If you speak with most of the humanitarian actors, they might mention to you 5 private sector actors that they know. But you would be shocked. In the tech sector alone, we have 100 tech actors that are active in that space, and you need to be taking advantage of the products that they develop. So that's why we're here today. And after this, sometime in March or April this year, you will do the dissemination of this workshop and define what the next actions are going to be. So in humanitarian response, private sector has been active, but not in a very active way. It's been more of reactive. So the private sector sits and you have a humanitarian response, so the private sector comes in to react to that humanitarian response. But the New York Declaration of 2017 looks at countries opening up their space to have an open door policy, but also include everyone in refugee issues, so that it's not a one corner that is sitting there doing refugee issues and the rest of the nation is moving forward in a different way. I'll not spend time on the GRF. Jason defined it very well, but I'd like to spend a little few seconds on the charter. The charter is the guidelines on how do we involve private sector to inclusively include refugees in the host communities. When we spoke with private sector, one of the things that they are surprised is, can we actually employ a refugee? So they think the process is very difficult. But the process is not difficult. That's why we'll be making another presentation to tell you how can you actually engage them. There is also a perception that some refugees are actually lazy. They do not want to work. Of course, there are some people who don't want to work. That is true. but we have the majority that are very eager to work and are looking for opportunities. Now, in Uganda, why have we been successful so far? Or what evidence do we have? One is we have a government that is very open and very supportive to support private sector to thrive within refugee hosting districts. Some of these districts didn't have things like electricity. Today we have electricity there. That's government initiative to create an environment that allows you to go and do business in an effective way. We are seeing new roads being opened up. We have a policy framework that allows the private sector to grow. That's a good thing. But we want to also hear from private sector. Is there something more that government can do to enable you, expand and scale up your businesses? There are many forums, and again, I'll refer back to the charts we have on the site, where there's a lot of discussions going on. But a few people know about these forums. Few people know that there is a district rent initiative. In West Nile, for instance, the private sector is organized in their own promotion center, but not everyone is part of that. You'll find other associations that are doing, say, meeting, there are others that are doing dice and so on. These kind of associations or forums discuss business, and we need to be part of that discussion. Some sectors have gone very fast. The energy sector, for instance, and the financial services have gone very fast. We now see the financial service, especially the mobile network, very active in the refugee space, taking that space, participating in meetings and coordination, and actually developing new products targeted at refugees and those communities within refugee hosting districts. Those are models that we need to scale up further and use as a benchmark to say which other sector can actually leverage that experience to grow their business. When we conducted this study, you'll be surprised that 82% of the private sector actors that were interviewed confirmed that they actually supply or source their products from refugees. 82%. That's a big number that shows there is already a lot of things that is happening. But we want to make it further bigger than that. Why? The private sector companies will come here and they will tell us, I have a contract to deliver 100,000 tons of a particular product to a European market or an American market. But today is 50%. So we have a challenge to ensure that they actually achieve their full potential and possibly exceed that potential. That's the discussion we need to be having today. What are some of the significant benefits when humanitarians and private sector work together? There are a lot of benefits. One is humanitarians are already known by the communities. As a private sector, when you partner with a humanitarian organization, you start your engagement and your business from a position of trust. We have studies that show how communities perceive businesses. Some communities perceive business as exploitative. They think you want to make money, I don't care about them. And they think the humanitarians care more about them because they're giving a lot of free services and free goods. So the humanitarians already know what is happening in the refugee space and the communities. And so when you work with them, it's like I'm assisting you to open the door. So you just get in and start your operation. But on the other side, the humanitarians can benefit a lot by working in the private sector. We cannot develop the products that the private sector can develop. The private sector has the capacity to do innovation. And that innovation should not just sit in some corner somewhere in Kampala if it can actually make a difference in Changwari or Nachivari or Obongi. We need to transfer that technology to those areas and be able to, bring services but also make money. And the financial service sector is why we see a lot of that happening. So when both of us work together, there are quite a lot of benefits that we can get. And today we are happy that all of us are sitting in this room together. We're going to create networks and be able to say, this is what I'm actually doing, and this is what we are looking for. There are some challenges. We spoke to the humanitarians, we spoke to the private sector. Each of them came up with their own challenges, but there were some common challenges that both those actors were facing. One of them is the issue of misconception. The fact that humanitarians, and I'll start with one very big one, which we call accountability. Humanitarian accountability requires us to inform, to consult, to participate, to give feedback. The private sector, on the other hand, does not know about humanitarian accountability. So they want to get in, do the business, and get out. The humanitarian act, on the other side, you must consult, you must inform. Why am I bringing this service? Do you actually require it? And then we must get feedback. And so we've been working on this journey to try and bridge that gap, ensure that this is a humanitarian setting, and there are some principles, key principles that we need to follow, and the private sector needs to do that. And I've seen the private sector actually transitioning to actually adopt some of those principles in their own operations. So first of all, that was, a key challenge. There is a challenge of business risk. I'm coming to invest, I'm moving my business from Kampala to go and invest in Achivare, where I didn't make money. If I don't make money, who then covers my risk? Can you cover my risk as a humanitarian worker, as a development actor? If you cannot cover my risk, then I might decide to stay away. And so those challenges come in. The issue of information, like I mentioned, we don't know who is supposed to do what. How do we actually get into that space? Who is doing what, in which particular areas? What kind of products are available? That's another big challenge. I want to spend a few seconds and speak about enough quantities, especially in agriculture. The study on value chains and a lot of value chain studies shown that we are not even achieving 50% of the national average for crops grown in refugee areas. Which means if you're doing tomato and assume the national average is 5 metric ton per hectare, we are not doing 2.5. We are below. If you are doing cassava and the average, national average for cassava is say 10 metric ton, we are not able to do 5 metric ton. We are not producing enough. In fact, myself and Ridian don't a whole tour of the entire country, and in most settlements, there is not enough food to go beyond that district, which means the production within the district is not sufficient to cater for the needs in that particular district. So we want the private sector to come in, but the first question they're asking is, do you have enough quantities? And that's why we need the development partners, because we're asking the development partners, can you actually provide sufficient funding to enable us produce not just the average, but sufficient and quality, so that the private sector can actually come in because they are guaranteed of quantities and the quality that they require to meet their needs. I will skip the continuation because I've spoken about it a little bit, but one final one is the differences in context between the West Nile and the North and the Southwest. You have a much better climate in the South compared to the North. You have differences in terms of the crops that you can grow there, a bigger population, different ways in farming, and an exploited potential in the livestock sector, especially with the South Sudanese community, which needs to grow. Some opportunities. One of them is creating linkages. And this meeting is going to do that. We're going to connect these actors together and ensure that the discussions can go beyond this meeting. There is a lot of potential in aggregation. Like I mentioned, small produce being produced in different areas and villages, but it needs to be aggregated so that a private sector actor can be confident that the quantities are there. That's an area where you can invest in. Inputs. We have under long discussion, very big discussion, sometimes difficult, sometimes controversial about inputs. The humanitarian actors, and I mentioned this a lot of times, we are spending billions in Kampala. We are not supporting businesses in rural areas to grow because we get all our inputs from the big producers or the big businesses in Kampala. We need to take that business in refugee hosting districts so that we can start, new small businesses in those areas and ensure that farmers do not have, farmers are closer to the people that provide inputs. That's a big opportunity. Training. You will hear from some of the presentations coming here. If, for instance, you do want to do mushroom, there's a particular quality that they require. If you are doing chili, if you are doing tomato, you don't go and spray the tomato, yesterday and today you are harvesting. It will not pass. There will be residues of chemicals. But that training needs to go to the farmer directly. So as a private sector, you have an opportunity to be able to customize those kind of trainings and ensure that you work with humanitarian actors to scale them down to the farmers that require that training. I will end up with processing. Why? A lot of produce that is being produced in refugee hosting districts is actually sold in its, as raw material. We don't process. Just take an example of maize grain. Maize grain will be sold for as little as 500 Uganda shillings a kilo. If it is processed to maize flour, the farmer has the capacity or the potential to make 2,000 Uganda shillings out of it on the minimum. That's 4 times the value. And therefore, humanitarian actors are not positioned to do, to invest in processing. But as a private sector, there is potential for you to invest in processing. And now that the government has put electricity and there's a good road, you see the connection. That's a win-win for all of us. What are some of the modalities that have been used in this relationship? Some of them as de-risking, where I take some of your risk because you are asking, if I come in this area, can I make money? If I don't make money, can you cover my risk? And so humanitarian actors can cover some of that risk. There is a lot of examples we can show in that. Providing subsidies or grants. So we work together and say there would be a grant here that, for instance, is going to support inputs. And as a private sector, can you come in and do training? So you come in and do the training. Or we are going to bring, a component such as financial services. We'll give it as a revolving fund. So you then have farmers who have a revolving fund. They can borrow credit and pay back because someone is guaranteeing that they will buy their produce. Collaborations, but I want to talk more about the co-creation because this is unexploited, but there's a lot of potential. A lot of times the humanitarians are working on their own, developing a product or a project. And then we call the private sector and say, oh, so and so, please come, we have this interesting product that we have here, we think you can add value. That's not to do it. We are encouraging that we need to start co-creation. So at design, bring the private sector in the room and say, if we were to create this product around the value chain of chili or mushroom or tomato or cassava, what would you actually do differently? Where is the potential for us to grow this? We would like to have that discussion more deeply on the co-creation. The village agent model is very well known, so I will not speak about that. But there's a new one on the incubation. And that's why we have some partners here, especially Swiss Contact, who support incubation, new ideas, try them out, and then launch them into the market. Wow, I hope I kept time. So that's the discussion we're going to have as, Marika is on that end. And we are hoping that this discussion goes beyond today. And let's get all the thoughts during the group work. And during the panel, we also want to please shoot as many questions as possible, and we'll get the panelists to provide us with as much responses as we can. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Paul. I think if you want to clap, let's clap for him well. Let's get serious at it. Thank you very much. That was a quick overview of a very rapid assessment that we did, and we spoke to some of you. who are in this room to get this. So this is not a desk review. It was basically speaking to some of you, and we got a feel of what's really going on there. So the next session, really, we are transitioning now to, initially when the PS talked and also our deputy representative, they did send, even the representative from FCDO, he said the refugee are a resource. Initially, they've been viewed as a burden or not necessarily positively. But I think today we want to hear from the Office of the Prime Minister how refugees could actually, you know, contribute to the economic development and become participants in the local economy based on the skill set, the educational levels, and the legal framework. It's quite enabling in Uganda. So allow me to welcome Mr. Charles Bafachi, who's the Assistant Commissioner at Department of Refugees in Office of the Prime Minister. You want to use this one?
Thank you, Lillian, for giving me this early morning chance to talk to the private sector and others in the room. About the refugee engagement with the private sector. Like has been said, I'm Bafat Charles. From the Office of the Prime Minister, the Department of Refugees. I'm glad to be here to share with you about refugee engagement. I have interacted with a number of you in this room on refugee issues. I have also been engaged on refugee issues for quite a while, and yes, and I was saying, for us in the refugee world, we are originally humanitarian because we were employed to save lives, but over time, after saving lives, we later realized that it does not stop at providing maybe a blanket, a saucepan, and some food. That is relevant when refugees have just entered the country and the immediate needs are just how to survive. And you only survive on food and some shelter, but shortly after, then refugees start appreciating other needs. And such needs are probably a bit more than what the humanitarian actors can provide. So we are glad we are here to share with you, and then we see how we can move together. That is the nature of the outline of my presentation. This historical background, most of you know it. I will not delve much into it, but mainly to say that we have been hosting refugees as a country since World War time. And we support or host refugees mostly in refugee settlements on land which is owned either by government or privately provided. Currently, this is the number of refugees that we have in the country, roughly. In those 376,000 households. And as you can see, females are that percent, youth are that percent. And for private sector, this graph or this slide may speak a lot to you in terms of private sector engagement. So if there are 1.5 million refugees, as the PS was saying in the morning, what opportunities do they present in terms of market, in terms of consumption, in terms of labor, in terms of skills, and other things. Those are their nationalities, mainly from South Sudan and DRC, but there are also other nationalities. Within our refugee setting, we have refugees who are employable in those percentages because we give them skills. Formal education is available in these settlements. We have secondary schools. We have sponsorship, scholarships for tertiary institutions, universities, and even practical skills, as you will see later. So most of you may have heard, or this morning it was alluded to, that we have the best, one of the best refugee policies in the world. In Uganda, refugees are free to, they have all the rights except the right to vote. So meaning they can do every other thing. They can move freely. They can engage in business. They can engage in, they have freedom of movement. They can own property and many other things. And of course, those are the areas that support the private sector. And besides international legal instruments, we also have a legal regime that protects those rights of the refugees. Of course, many times we are challenged by other people as to why we give all this to refugees, and this huge generosity, and others even say at the expense of the nationals. But I think it is not at the expense, as I will show you later. The country national administrative architecture is conducive. We have NDP3, where refugee activities are embedded, and there is security, and there is also availability of livelihood, self-reliance opportunities within these areas, and also an accommodative host community. So even when you you want to go and do business there, the host community is receptive to your activity there. So those are some of the activities the refugees are engaged in, mainly agriculture, like someone was presenting shortly before me. Although for me as a person, I would want a discussion to move some strides away from agriculture per se. And I have reasons. Yes, agriculture for self-sustenance, but other ventures for economic growth. These are activities, the opportunities already prevailing in these settlements. The savings groups are there. They have some money, and they are doing some business. Benefits are there. One of them is hosting refugees and making them engaged in our economy, boosts the local economy of the hosts through expanded market, employment, etc., offers hope, promotes regional trade through acquaintances, skills transfer, foreign currency, and enhanced regional security, because when these youth get busy, get involved in production, they have no time for these other things. It sounds political, but it is also economic. So those are the skills that we have. Those are some of the economic ventures you can find in these places. If this refugee sells these seedlings, he has income to spend probably on things which you, the private sector, can. When they sell this produce, when it is ready, I think they are able to engage in bigger economies. And like you can see, this is maize in Chaka, almost ready for harvest. And when they harvest this, they have income with which to engage with you. I thank you for now, and I am available to respond to any issues that I may not have touched in these 5 minutes which we are given to speak to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was Mr. Bafati from the Department of Refugees talking to us about, what's going on in that space. I'm wondering if some of the figures caught your interest in terms of the savings that are with these village saving groups. That's information I believe that it would be of interest to the private sector. It's amazing to see the maize fields. And every time you go to the settlements, for those of you who have not been there, we see truckloads getting out the grains out from these places. We do know they're middlemen, but the opportunity is there. So thank you very much. I think as we transition to the next slide, we're going to have Ministry of Finance. And we're transitioning to a now different setting where we want to really understand the macroeconomic landscape. How does it look like? How does this humanitarian response fit in? And how do you as private sector and the development partners who we hope can come in and kind of continue strengthening the trajectory of this response, where do you fit in? So please welcome Ms. Diana Nanono, and over to you, Diana.
Thank you, Lillian. Thank you, Lillian.
Also, please remember to give us your questions. Hassan is collecting them over there so that we can get them all together for the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Diana Nanono, the head of the Private Sector Development Unit at the Ministry of Finance. It is an honor for me to be in your midst this morning. And my duty is to largely paint the macroeconomic landscape around private sector competitiveness in this country. So I'll start off with basically painting a picture under the National Development Plan 3. So according to the National Development Plan 3, the private sector in Uganda generates 77% of formal and informal jobs. It contributes 80% of our GDP. It funds 60% of all investments and employs over 2.5 million people. Again, according to the National Development Plan 3, the private sector in Uganda is still weak and uncompetitive, largely due to a number of reasons, some of which include the high cost of doing business, the limited production and organizational capacity, the inadequate enabling environment for the private sector to operate, the weak enforcement of standards and the proliferation of counterfeits on the market, and the inadequate strategic and sustainable government investments and partnerships with the private sector. So I'll run us through a background that government of Uganda has been at the forefront of ensuring that we have a competitive private sector. And to this end, it has designed several frameworks that pertain to private sector competitiveness. One of which is the Vision 2040, which identifies the private sector as an engine of growth and development. The NDP 3 reiterates the same position and also highlights some of the programs that pertain to private sector development. Some of these include the Private Sector Development Program, the Manufacturing Program, the Agro-Industrialization Program, the Tourism Program, among others. Government of Uganda has also developed the second national strategy for private sector development. The trend from 2022-23, and it's supposed to complete in 2026-27. However, along the way, we have had several frameworks that pertain to private sector development since the 2000s. So between 2001 to 2005, the Ministry of Finance designed the medium-term competitiveness strategy, which was succeeded by the Competitiveness for Investment Climate Strategy 1, the trend from 2006 to 2010. Thereafter, we had the Competitiveness for Investment Climate Strategy 2, the trend from 2011 to 2015-16. And this was succeeded by the first National Strategy for Private Sector Development, the trend from 2017 to 22. And currently, we have the second National Strategy for Private Sector Development that was launched on the 1st of December 2022, and it's supposed to run until 2027. So what are some of the lessons that we've learned from implementing the first National Strategy for Private Sector Development? We note that the first National Strategy for Private Sector Development was in tandem with the several NDPs, but we realized that serious gaps still existed in the enabling environment, and some largely pertained to public investments in infrastructure, to say the least. Secondly, the first National Strategy for Private Sector Development assumed that the set targets would be prioritized by the different ministries, departments, and agencies. without a locus for monitoring performance, which impeded realization of set objectives. So in the second national strategy for private sector development, we have come up with a robust monitoring and evaluation framework to be able to cater for that gap. Again, the first national strategy for private sector development was largely biased towards urban areas, and that is to say the Greater Kampala metropolitan area, and lacked the inclusiveness desired due to biases against sub-regional private sector players. So what we recently did was that we had to embed the private sector at the sub-national level in the second national strategy for private sector development, taking into account the 15 statistical sub-regions of this country. And maybe the last is that the first national strategy largely focused on enterprise growth and competitiveness. And we note that resilience was a key gap in that strategy and in the previous strategies. We are cognizant of the fact that we're in the post-pandemic era, and it was important for us to account for resilience of enterprises going forward. I'll just briefly run us through the achievements under the first national strategy for private sector development. The strategy had several benchmark actions, and I'll take us through what was largely achieved, one of which was the fact that we had to develop and implement a legal and regulatory framework for payments and settlements. And to that end, the National Payment Systems Act 2020 was passed and is currently operational. There were also key actions around infrastructure development, and to that end, the first Kampala flyover is still under construction. There was also an action around computerization of the land registry to increase access to land and access to land rights, enforcement of land rights. And to this end, the land registry has been computerized with the National Land Information System, to which we have 22 ministry zonal land offices constructed all over the country. It also focused on establishing industrial parks, and by the time of its close, we had 5 industrial parks fully operational. I'll just take us through the second national development strategy for private sector development. What is it really? So we are saying that it's a 5-year private sector framework that identifies and coordinates state and non-state actors for competitiveness towards market development, increased investment, and job creation. And what are those things that informed the development of the second national strategy for private sector development? We note that government had adopted the programmatic approach in NDP 3, whereas we had the private sector development program already embedded in this plan. It was necessary, but it was inadequate to capture all the other private sector development issues. So that is why we needed to develop a strategy to this end. We also note that there was need to coordinate all the private sector issues across the 20 NDP3 programs. You realize that we have 20 programs under the National Development Plan 3, and in each of these programs, there are private sector development issues. So it was important for all these to be brought together. But we also realized that there was need for equitable development through the subnational level interventions. And those were addressed under the area-based commodity development program and the parish development model strategies. So this is the theory of change for the second national strategy for private sector development. It's hinged on 3 pillars. One is the macro pillar, next is the meso pillar, and the micro pillar. And the macro pillar largely focuses on the enabling environment for the private sector. The fact that we need to create an enabling environment for the private sector at the macro level. The meso pillar largely focuses on the industrial linkages or business-to-business linkages. And the micro pillar focuses on the farm, the enterprise that does business, for it to be able to access the opportunities that would be available. It's important that it is formalized. So we think that it's also important for us to focus on the farm. So what are the key features of this second strategy? One is the fact that it's a national coordination framework for all private sector development interventions. But it also focuses on the subnational competitiveness of the different sub-regions in this country. It also has one of the cross-cutting issues around refugees. You heard this morning that we have a population of over 1.5 million refugees in this country. But the strategy also focuses on climate smart and green interventions. I think I'll just run briefly through this because I'm hard up on time. So at the macro level, the strategy looks at the legal, regulatory, and administrative procedures for business, really. We note that there are several hindrances within our laws that make it difficult for businesses to operate. So government has taken a deliberate effort to ensure that we eliminate the barriers to doing of business in most of our laws. And to this end, we have the business licensing regulatory reform process. I won't run through others. I'll just move to the meso interventions, where we are keen on enhancing access to markets and growing opportunities. And to this end, we think it's important to develop the National Export Development Strategy. At the micro pillar, like I mentioned, we focus on enterprises, and it's important that we formalize them and professionalize them. There are several ongoing interventions by government of Uganda towards development of the private sector and ensuring it's competitive. I'll just run briefly through these and close. So one is the high cost of credit, which increases the cost of doing business. And to this end, we note that government has increased capitalization of Postbank to 158 billion and UDB to 1.1 trillion as of 30th October 2022. There are also several other interventions to that effect. We also have an issue around limited access to affordable financing. But we note that government has broadened the spectrum of security that can be used for MSMEs to borrow, beyond the traditional security around land, but to also include motor vehicles, goods and trade, and plant and machinery, under the security interest in movable property legislation and the registry operated by Uganda Registration Services Bureau. We also have an issue around the high informality in the economy, which the NDP3 captured at 51%. And we're saying that government recently launched the online business registration system run by Uganda Registration Services Bureau, where at the comfort of your home, including the refugees, they can log on to this system and be able to formalize business in this country. We also have an issue of the high mortality of MSMEs. And to this effect, government launched the National Business Development Services Framework in October 2022 to help businesses operate better. And we are also currently implementing the informality management for compliance and resilience of enterprises to help enterprises keep better records and be able to access the benefits of formalization. I think I'll just wrap up my presentation at that. I thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Diana, from Private Sector Development Unit at Ministry of Finance. We have about 30 minutes delay on the program at the moment, so I propose we go into a break now. I think most people can use a little bit of an energizer. What we did already, we've kind of set the scene. We looked at the micro, what's happening on the ground, and now we started to talk about the macro level. So after the break, we'll hear from IFC and from two private sector actors about their experiences. Then we'll do a breakout group exercise where we're going to think a little bit around challenges, solutions, and formulate some questions for the panel. And then we'll go for lunch. After lunch, we'll have a very nice panel discussion, which will look at a little bit at kind of ways forward and expectations, etc., for the solutions for moving private sector engagement forward in the refugee hosting areas in Uganda. And therefore, I think now I just wanted to say we have the posters on the wall. So as I mentioned at the start, these are exercises where we've tried to map as much as possible private sector actors, coordinating bodies, trade bodies, umbrellas, and also agri-tech service providers that operate in the refugee hosting areas. So please take some sticky notes and add anything that we might have missed, correct anything that might be wrong while you're having your cup of tea and while you're chatting to each other. Please use the opportunity to also meet new people across all the different groups. That would be lovely. So we'll see you all back in 30 minutes. So that would be at 11:30. Yes. And for the people online, we'll also see you back at 11:30 for the following presentations. For the people online, there is also we'll drop a link in the chat box where you can access the posters, and then you can use the comment function to add comments to the posters where there's anything missing or there's anything you would like to correct. Thank you. And then the question forms, please continue to hand them to us. Thank you very much.
really is it that is the meat and the substance of how you can engage and some of the numbers, I believe, yeah? So thank you, Mr. Taif. Take us through. You have about 10 minutes? Yes. 15, but you can make it 10.
Thank you. Welcome again. And still it's good morning. I think you all had a chance to take a good tea or coffee break. So you can take a deep breath inside, as because I'm going to give you a few numbers, which is going to help us go to the breakout session after all this presentation, and we can discuss more. So IFC is basically, I'm sure most of you already know, is basically the private consumer market study. A few copies are there. If you are interested, you can take it from there, or if you are really environment friendly kind of person, then you can let us know. We can send you the online version and you can check. Then we did our energy study. We did a value chain study. Yeah. So I actually was waiting. So as I said in the beginning, I'll give you a few numbers. So please try to keep that in your mind. So we did this consumer market study in 8 different districts in, among all the refugee hosting districts. And we found most of the people, a big chunk of people are actually either working or self-employed. 70% in Southwest, 47% West Nile. So this is a good number that you need to remember. Household earning is $47 in Southwest and $52 West Nile. Average monthly household expenditure 37. So this is something I'm going to break it down in the next slide. And if you consider the total market size in 8 different districts, it's very close to $500 million market. So let me put it in that way. So basically, if you consider the Uganda GDP, which is $40.5 billion, 0.5, close to 0.5 coming from refugee hosting districts as a consumer market contribution is like a big chunk of money. So that really excites financial institutions, manufacturing and service industries for them to consider consider this market, how to come and participate in that big action. So this is the breakdown. So if you remember, I said $37 they spent in the refugee hosting areas. It's $21 basically average, which is 59%. They spent on food and beverage, personal hygiene items, dresses, clothes, alcoholic drinks. And the other 41% goes to airtime, internet, health, transportation, energy, and education. And when it comes to food and beverage, basically they buy cooking oil, fruits and vegetables, rice, maize, flours. You can see it's like a small meat and tea, coffee. So basically they buy all these products, and then they spend around 15% of their other expenditure for energy. So I'll explain that in the next slide. So this slide is very decisive. Basically, the way how it is structured, if you look at it, a lot of these refugees actually in the host communities have access to bank account, either with equity or post-bank. That's the significant portion. But if you consider, drilling down to that bank account and see what they do with that bank account, it's basically cash in, cash out. So they don't do a lot. So if you think like, okay, how do they access the money? Then a lot of them are interested in mobile money service. So that's a huge chunk where Airtel and MTN doing fantastic. And I think they are thinking of expanding their operation in that space in a big way. And most of the people actually are going to either VSLAs, their neighbors, or family members or friends. So that's very informal kind of sector. So you don't get the credit kind of information or their ratings or the transaction history that can help you design a program. Then their source of information is mostly very informal, family, friends, community announcements, only mass media. In fragmented market, factors. So we thought like this can be a big market where the solar companies can target. The cooking space is still dominating by the firewood and charcoal products. So they spend $40 million on firewood and charcoal, which we thought, of course, climate issues are there, GVV issues there, a lot of conflict within the host and communities are happening because of it. So these could have been targeted in a different way by bringing in alternative cooking mechanism, including LPGs or more efficient cook stoves or something like that. So that is something still very untapped market for private sector companies to think. And the last one is like, of course, if you go to the settlement areas, you'll find a lot of these very small scale, very tiny, less than 10 kilowatt kind of solar products. Most of them are not very efficient, very low quality product, not dying in 3 to 6 months. That is the thing. And then there are good companies who actually can be supported by showing this 10 million market and help them convert into the high capacity solar products so that they get the modular version, solar home systems, this and that, to help them go for the better kind of productive use sector. Okay, so we looked at the fruit and moringa value chains because that's another very vibrant sector working in these refugee districts. And we found a lot of informal transactions happening, a lot of informal movement between farmers and aggregators are happening, but it's not giving them a lot of value for their effort. And a lot of these fruits are being wasted, not being used for multiple, alternative sources. So if you consider the major private sector players here who are processing fruits and making, selling fruits and other kind of juice in Uganda. Most of them, if you consider the data from the import, if you consider the import data, most of them are buying the pulp at a very cheaper price from China and India. Some of them were really interested to buy it from Argentina, not from locally. So very interesting kind of situation where we felt like a aggregated and very strategic kind of intervention can help them grow more here and actually join the slogan for the Ugandan government, where it's Boo Boo, Buy Uganda, Build Uganda kind of initiative, where more production facility can come and do more. So our study shows like, it can be commercially sourced from the farmers directly by using the network they have, or some of these humanitarian agencies can help them do it better. We have a few examples. Somebody just mentioned Grain Pulse in the past. So basically, Grain Pulse is one of these type of institution who actually is working in that space, and they think like, okay, a strategic kind of intervention can help them go 7 times more buying from the districts. So that is something we really found it through our assessment. And we felt like post-harvest handling and storage infrastructure is really missing in Uganda, so something needs to be done, and if we can add as value chain and linkages, access to finance, and access to energy. These 3 sectors are cross-cutting more or less for Uganda refugee space. And if we really can help them explore and proliferate more, definitely is going to change the whole economic condition in the area. Other possible sectors, recycling. We have a lot of plastic are being dumped. So a few good initiatives are already here. PRI and some institutions are trying to recycle them. That is one. Then craft production is something that Uganda can really do a lot. And marketing them with linkage with international buying platforms definitely can help them go big. And affordable housing is something, the last point, but not the least, for us to think and consider in this space. So thank you so much. And just in case if you need more clarity or information for you to just understand the sector better, or if you want to touch base with us, please email or contact us. Thank you.
Let's give him a round of applause. Indeed, I mean, it takes time to prepare for you. We were quite diligent, and some people I know went to bed at 3 a.m. just making sure that these slides were ready for you. I don't know who can tell me what's the size of the market from just what he said. What's the size of this refugee market? They monetized it. I will pick. Yes, Patrick. $1 million. That's the size of that. You're quite spot on. I think you're keen. So that's really the size of this refugee market. Now, these are figures that I believe interest the private sector. It interests, and the development partners too, and the government. How about, what does that represent? I think he said about, is it $5 billion? That's the value of, what percentage does it represent of the economy? 5%? 3%? Roughly. Coincidentally, that's the same, almost to the population, the refugee population representation. Because the population of Uganda, what's the population of Uganda? As per the last census. 50 million, right? Yeah, so if we have 1.5 million refugees, that represents what percentage? I see guys are going on calculators. I never liked mathematics either. But I think it's about 3%, 3 to 5% given, give or take, yeah? Okay, 1% is a big difference, maybe 3%. So it's almost comparable. So we're saying that is the size of that market, and he tried to break down, you know, some of the numbers for you. So now we want to go to the next session where we want to hear from the private sector themselves. Some of them were brave enough to take a step, and they're already there. They're doing it, the challenges and all, but they are surmounting them. So I want to invite Ntasa. And this is one of the agencies that has been working.
We work in Changwari, refugee settlement, and some part of Wamanja, and specifically we are in mushrooms. The picture can tell you what we do. That is a picture of a farmer selling mushrooms, and the other ones also are harvests. We came in to address the issue of limited land, lack of employment, and lack of skills. Our entry point was that Swiss Contact did an assessment, and later they landed to us. We were doing mushrooms as both an art and science innovation. So they hired us to provide technical services in the areas of training refugee farmers and host community farmers, so that they can now use small space and grow mushrooms. Mushrooms are grown on a small plot of land that is 5 meters by 5 meters, and you can harvest too much money from it, as you will see. We came in with an approach of conducting career guidance and project awareness. This one we did it in partnership with other livelihood sector working groups and protect working group. The livelihood sector helped us to identify the already existing groups, and the protection sector helped us to identify the refugees that needed support of medicinal, as mushrooms is a medicinal crop, as well as people who couldn't access livelihood because of the inability. We worked with OPM. They provided us land. We used the approach of TOT model, and later we also constructed a laboratory to enable us and enable the refugees to access the seed. We have had wonderful results. 100 groups were trained, and as of today, they are legal entities. Out of the 100 groups, 2 are of people living with HIV, 2 are of people with disabilities, 2 are of people elderly, then 9 are from nationals. From the investment, the seed capital from Swiss Contact and UNHCR, we have managed to improve the income to a tune of $89,000. This was an assessment that was done by Swiss Contact after our 3 months engagement. And that meant 5.34 Uganda, 5,340,000 in 60 groups. We established 49 mushroom production sites, and everyone is enjoying the income as well as food security. We have contributed to the employment, as most of the materials used in mushroom production, for your information, mushrooms are produced from agricultural wastes. Those are bean hussicks, coffee hussicks, rice straws. Those hussicks, we buy them from the refugees, from the nationals, and 40% of those materials we use it to train them were bought or purchased from those people surrounding Changwari. 270 host community members benefited from the intervention. They were trained in mushroom production. They were trained in the leadership. We also trained them in value addition skills. We used the approach of cash for work. As I told you, mushrooms are grown in a production shelter, and refugees whom we would employ in the construction would pay them Uganda shillings 140,000, and that was a source of income. We addressed food insecurity in 1,450 households, and as well as accessing to nutritious food. The lessons we learned: refugees are good. They are always available in case you need them for labor. There is good social cohesion. They can easily adapt to hygiene because mushroom is a venture where you need to practice maximum hygiene. They were good when we told them about diversifying from mushrooms to vegetables. And as well as they would tell other partners, the neighborhood partners, that why can't you also join mushrooms, because mushrooms is good. And as I talk today, RIT has started, and I'm sure we'll reach a big number. Refugees are good at when you mobilize them using other refugees, it will be easy. That's why the TOT model has for us. The incentive model to refugees during engagement has also worked very well. We have had also limitations. Changwai, where we work, there are many tribes. We had a case where we put two groups, one group of Bagegere, another group of Banyabwisha at one production unit. That one didn't work. So what we did, we had to create another production unit to separate them. That's the only challenge we had. We also at the beginning had a challenge of accessing quality mushroom spawn, because the only laboratory that was providing us with mushroom spawn was Makerere. And because of the bigger market and customers they have, they would delay us. So we addressed it by constructing our laboratory for mushrooms. We are grateful to UNHCR and Swiss Contact that confunded the money, and we made sure that it was put in place, as well as training 12 refugees to manage it. We are grateful to some of the opportunities we found. One of the opportunity was the local market. Mushrooms are so delicious. They are medicinal, and they are liked by everyone. So you will not regret if you join mushroom industry. The oil industry in Chikube that need only organic foods has also Equity Bank has started to go to boost their mushroom production. That is Upendo Group. As a company, we have also benefited. We managed to increase our sales. We increased our revenue. We increased our employment from 7 staff to 33. We managed to work with other 8 companies in providing this service. And I'm telling you, there is great in mushrooms. Join mushroom production. Thank you.
Private sector are quite efficient. Straight to the point, and some nice numbers there. Mushroom production. So that was in Changwali. That was Mr. Mark Safari. He's the managing director of Mtasa Manufacturers. So next one is going to be KK Foods. KK Food, fresh produce exporters. I normally sometimes would see the trucks, but I got an opportunity to meet the people. So Mr. Nicholas Atukwasi is going to take us through what KK has been doing with the refugees.
Good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nicholas Atukwasi, and I work for KK Fresh Produce Exporters Limited. We are producers and exporters of fresh fruits and vegetables out of Uganda. We work with small-scale farmers, the smallholder farmers, who produce and supply their products to KK Foods, and then we do the exports. And of course, one of the target communities is the community of the refugees across this country. We are present in more than 45 districts in this country, and we aggregate all the products from those areas. I want to speak about the present and the future because I want to talk about the opportunities that we have for our communities, but also for the refugees that we have here in this country. We have a secured market, and this market is different from part of the market that we have had for several years that we have been doing business. And currently we have a market of about 208 metric tons of pulp paper, and that comes from about 500,000 kilos of hot paper as fruits. So the raw material that we need from these farmers is actually more than 500,000 kilos, and that is annually. And that, of course, translates to about 10 metric tons every week of this fresh product called hot paper alone. We deal in more than 25 products, but this is just one product that I'm talking about. And in addition to that hot paper also is sold as fresh fruits. And we have an available market of about 416 metric tons annually. And we do this weekly, and that means 8 metric tons are required every week from these farmers. We don't actually do the actual production ourselves of this product, so we solicit all this from the outgrowers. So that tells you the opportunity that we have for most of our people, especially the refugees. So currently, because one would ask, so what are you doing as of today compared to what you should be having? We have the current production and supply capacity from our farmers of about 3 metric tons every week, and this has been only given to the value addition part. And so we are 100% lacking on the fruits part. This is also an issue to do with the quality assurance. the several crop products that we have that we export, and that is part of the mixture of the crop products that we export. It's a mixture of more than 25 crop products. So for all this that we are looking at 100 metric tons every week. The other dry chili, we are looking at 100 metric tons every month. And the other hot pepper, we are looking at 8 tons of fresh, but also 10 metric tons of fresh, but for processing. So we have, for us able to work efficiently with the farmers, of course we are a lead farmer model, but also we are working with several partners. I'm happy to report that we have worked with several development partners like Swiss Contact. Most of the farmers that we are working with now, 60% of them are women and youth. And this has come from some partnership that we have had with, for example, Swiss Contact, we have worked with Méstil, with Habitrust. We have worked with several other partners, of course, including Ministry of Agriculture, which is always our partner in all the activities that we do. So all these partnerships have been able to guide us and also be able to help us in ensuring that we work with these farmers efficiently. But also, we have worked with other, the private sector itself, like banks. The previous speakers talked about Equity Bank. We have an MOU with Equity Bank to support these farmers that are organized in VSLAs, and they provide them with unsecured loans. And we are now entering into, I think, round 3 for those who are pioneers of the initiative. Swiss Contact has supported some of the groups in Nuero, and with KKF's Equity Bank came in to support some of these groups, and they have continued access to the funds, and of course we know as have been having issues of access. These part have been helping farmers to get money to help in production. The irrigation, you know, climate change is an issue. When we talk about sustainable production, you can't miss talking about irrigation. So we need these irrigation companies on board to be able to provide irrigation kits. These are the partnerships that we have. Companies provide these kits on credit, and then the farmers are able to pay for these kits using the products that they sell to KK. So that's how we have been able to to boost our partnership, our engagements with farmers, but also to get what we have been able to get, but also which is insufficient, because as I said, it is only about 25% of what we need. So we have worked with several farmers, 2,000 farmers, 60% of which are women and youth. These numbers are the numbers of farmers that are actually been producing directly. We have several other people who are in excess of over 5,000 that have been participating in production and post-harvest handling practices. And also these are throughout the period that we have been able to construct one of the biggest cold chain facilities for food here, and it is almost getting completed. And I think, and it's very few weeks ago, government gazetted it as a free zone, and we will be able now to handle most of our products for delivery is being completed, and we will be able now to have improvements in quality and also sustainable supply. When there is a lot, we can be able to store and be able to keep supplying over time. We do the trainings for farmers in the communities, and that's part of the activities that we have to do to ensure that quality is observed. I thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you, Nicholas. I think he's done a good job of trying to demonstrate. Due to the time constraints, we only invited 2 private sector actors to give a bit of an experience of what, and from what I hear, looks pretty positive. So I think based on what IFC presented when they monetized the market, what opportunity there, and we think some private sector have already taken the leap and they're already there, they're doing it. I think there's a bit of learning that we You've had some questions from the presentation that Paul did morning, which was about the key format, from the presentation that was done by a colleague from OPOT. Refugees as a burden, but more a resource. They have labor skills, they are business full, and then look at what if monetized, and also some of the challenges were able to, and Ministry of Finance, when they talked about the limitations that really private sector are facing, and now what the private sector have said about the successes, but also the challenges. And I think some of this will form what you're going to discuss at the group. After this, then we will reconvene, or we will break out for lunch and then reconvene. But I'll give it over to Marie to take us through.
Thank you very much, Lillian. And thank you all for still being with us. It was a lot of information that was shared this morning. But I hope it was interesting and that everyone really think, okay, if you wouldn't mind moving to that table over there, so that we have one per table. And then Taif, if you wouldn't mind moving to the middle one. So, yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7. Yes, great.